A lone fisherman, surrounded by solitude, drifts on a boat. His net is slowly rising from the depths, an uneventful catch expected. As he watches the net tighten, he assumes it will be filled with the usual, perhaps a few odd fish or debris, nothing too unusual. But then something catches his attention. The net has grown heavy, far heavier than usual. Confused, the fisherman pulls it closer. His eyes widen as he realizes the weight is not from his usual haul. A body, a woman, emerges from the net's tangled web. The sight is shocking, and the fisherman freezes for a moment, unable to fully process what he's seeing. At first, he couldn't believe his eyes. Slowly, he inches closer to inspect. The woman, pale and lifeless, seems to have been abandoned by the sea. The fisherman's immediate instinct is to call for help, but as he moves closer, something stirs. She moves. She's alive, but barely. In that moment, the fisherman's shock shifts into action. He quickly drags her onto the dock and starts mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. The woman coughs and gasps for air, coming to her senses with a mix of confusion and terror. She doesn't understand what has happened to her. The fisherman tries to calm her, but her mind is blank. She can't recall the recent events, and the shock she's in makes it hard to even comprehend that she's alive. The fisherman reassures her, suggesting that she needs to see a doctor, but the mention of people causes the woman to panic. She's terrified of society, of human contact, perhaps driven mad by her near-death experience. The fisherman, known as Syracuse, takes the woman to a cabin, a place his mother once lived. Syracuse is aware that drowning can cause memory loss, and he believes the woman will recover, though it might take time. He feels a strange connection to her, noticing the fear she exhibits even in the face of safety. The woman, though frightened and disoriented, accepts his kindness with a strange hesitance, almost as if she doesn't know how to respond to human care. As Syracuse feeds her and tries to comfort her, the woman slowly begins to settle. Her gaze shifts. She starts to regain some clarity. But there's still fear in her eyes. She's clearly scared of something, maybe of herself, of being seen, of being touched. Her discomfort around Syracuse makes him uncertain of his role in her recovery. He leaves, feeling slightly rejected, but knowing he must get back to his responsibilities, namely picking up his daughter, Annie. Syracuse picks up Annie, his daughter, who uses a wheelchair. The relationship between Syracuse and Annie is warm, though there's an underlying tension. As they converse, Syracuse half-jokingly asks if anything strange has happened to her today. His question, more of a hopeful wish than a genuine inquiry, seems to reflect a longing for something extraordinary to disrupt the monotony of their lives. This subtle yearning for something magical or life-changing becomes a theme in the story. Later, Syracuse takes Annie to the doctor's office for her regular dialysis. He starts to tell her a story, just as any father might tell a story to pass the time. The story is about a fisherman, himself, who found a woman in his net, a woman he believes to be a mermaid or a mythical sea creature. Annie's imagination is sparked. She pictures the woman in the story as a sulky, a sea creature who loses her seal coat when she comes to land. But eventually, the fisherman's tale morphs into a real-life connection with the mysterious woman Syracuse has rescued. The following morning, Syracuse passes his mother's place and finds the woman washing her clothes by the stream. For a moment, he wonders if everything that happened was just a dream, but seeing her there confirms that it was real. The woman, who has no recollection of her past, remains nameless, so Syracuse gives her the name Ondine, referencing a mythical creature he believes could explain her origins. As Ondine begins to adjust to life with Syracuse, an unexpected connection begins to form. The two embark on a fishing trip, and something strange happens. Ondine sings. Her voice is enchanting, almost magical, and as she sings, Syracuse begins to catch an unusual number of lobsters. It's as if her song has brought him luck. Intrigued by this, Syracuse decides to take her to town to sell the lobsters, but Ondine remains distant from society, unwilling to interact with anyone except Syracuse. Back in town, Syracuse's personal life takes center stage. He picks up clothes for his daughter, Annie, but also does something out of character. He buys women's clothing for Ondine, something that causes him to feel awkward and embarrassed. This action reveals his growing feelings for the mysterious woman, though he seems to wrestle with the emotions bubbling up inside him. Later, he visits the church, where he has a candid conversation with the priest about his troubled past, his sobriety, and his feelings of guilt. His confession about women's clothing provides a glimpse into his emotional turmoil. While he has no intention of seeking professional help, his unresolved emotions continue to weigh on him. Meanwhile, Annie, curious about the mermaid-like woman, delves into research, hoping to uncover the truth behind Ondine's origins. One day, she visits Ondine and uncovers something significant. Ondine is not just a woman from the sea. She may have a past tied to the myth of the sulky. As Annie tells Ondine about the lore, Ondine begins to exhibit signs of fear and hesitation, realizing that her true nature may soon be revealed. The scene builds a sense of tension as Ondine and Annie's growing friendship strengthens. Ondine, feeling more comfortable around Annie, slowly opens up, revealing hints of her mysterious past. She shares tales of the sea, of her origins, and of the consequences of being a creature between two worlds. Annie's discovery that Ondine may be a sulky sets the stage for the ultimate conflict. If Ondine does have a seal coat, the implications are clear. She must either return to the sea or live on land for 7 years, bound by an ancient and powerful myth. Ondine, though initially reluctant to reveal her past, is forced to confront her fears and emotions. The growing connection between Syracuse, Annie, and Ondine suggests that they might be able to defy the laws of myth, but Ondine's true identity remains a source of tension. As Annie continues to explore the lore, Ondine finds herself drawn to the idea that she might be able to live among humans, but only if she can bury her seal coat and stay hidden from the forces of the sea that might one day call her back. In the next scene at his mother's house, Syracuse opens up to Ondine about his troubled past. Known as Circus because of his clumsy, circus-like behavior in his former alcoholic days, he explains how Ondine forced him to change. The moment he saw her and Mora, both passed out in the street, he realized he needed to be sober for their sake, even though he had no custody of them. Yet, his life had dramatically changed. Syracuse and Ondine lie together as a storm rages outside. He reflects on the story she once shared about how she drowned in the water, wondering how many lives she had left. Ondine, filled with love, vows to live for eternity for him. The intimacy of this night marks a turning point for them both, yet a dark figure looms on the horizon. The next day, Alex and Mora, Syracuse's ex-wife, inform Annie about the dark-haired man who had come looking for the lady from the water. Annie, disturbed by this news, has nightmares of a sulky man emerging from the water. As Syracuse and Ondine share a quiet moment together, the storm outside mirrors the chaos brewing in their lives. Syracuse is filled with guilt and fear about the magic he's encountered with Ondine, and he seeks solace in the priest, revealing his internal conflict. But just as he exits the church, the mysterious black-haired man confronts him, probing about Ondine. Later, Annie grapples with her dual existence, torn between the fantasy world of her father and the gritty reality with her mother. Meanwhile, Ondine hides in the greenhouse, aware that the black-haired man is coming. Syracuse, meanwhile, goes back to check on Ondine after leaving Annie with Mora and Alex in the bar. When he finds her beneath the bridge, she speaks of a sky husband who has come to claim her, aligning with the mythical lore of her people. They share a quiet moment, making wishes for each other's futures, even as a storm continues to rage outside. While Syracuse and Ondine make their wishes, Mora and Alex, inebriated and bickering, crash into the black-haired man's car. Tragedy strikes, and Alex doesn't survive the accident. Syracuse arrives at the scene, filled with guilt and panic, but the paramedics assure him that Annie is unharmed. But what follows is even stranger. Doctors discover that Alex and Annie share a tissue match, and Annie is in line to receive a kidney transplant. Later, Ondine, sensing the presence of the black-haired man, confronts him in the hospital. Their conversation is cryptic, revealing their past connection but leaving much unsaid. Ondine's loyalty to Syracuse is clear, but the past is never far behind. Meanwhile, Mora survives the crash, and she makes a surprising offer. Once she recovers, she wants Annie to stay with Syracuse on the condition that Ondine is not part of their lives. Syracuse, caught between his love for Ondine and his duties as a father, doesn't protest, but the weight of the decision hangs heavy. Syracuse, unable to cope with the pressure, slips back into old habits and drinks heavily. The black-haired man shadows his every move, watching his descent. The next day, Syracuse, now drunk, goes searching for Ondine. His internal turmoil and guilt have driven him to make rash decisions, including the plan to leave Ondine on the lighthouse island, convinced that she is too dangerous for him. As Syracuse sails to the lighthouse island with Ondine, she begins to understand that he plans to abandon her. Panic rises in her as Syracuse, consumed by fear and guilt, leaves her behind. But Ondine refuses to accept this fate. She runs after him, but it's too late. Syracuse is already in the sea, shouting that they can never be together. The painful truth hits both of them. Fairy tales don't end this way. The priest finds Syracuse, lying under a tree, consumed by misery. He tries to comfort him, but Syracuse is lost in the weight of his actions. However, the priest hints at the possibility of change, of redemption. The next day, Syracuse realizes the mistake he made by abandoning Ondine, and he rushes to find her, shouting her name. He eventually locates her, though she's worn out from swimming through the storm. Ondine, still clinging to the lie of being a mystical sea creature, tells Syracuse that she isn't who she claimed to be. Her real name is Joanna, a Romanian woman who was involved in a smuggling operation gone wrong. She drowned, escaping a life of crime, only to be resurrected by the sea and its magic. Back home, Ondine reveals the truth to Syracuse. She is no fairy tale, no magical sea creature, just a woman who survived a terrible ordeal. But Syracuse refuses to let go of her, insisting that they belong together despite the harsh reality. They are confronted by the black-haired man, Vladik, who wants the stolen goods Ondine was transporting. This was the same bag hidden by Ondine and Annie wrapped in a seal coat. Ondine guided them to find the bag, but it was not there as Annie had put it somewhere else without informing Ondine to protect her from that black-haired man. Ondine soon realized that if they find the bag, they will kill us. The chaos climaxes in a struggle on the water, as Vladik is inadvertently drowned in the process. With the coast guards arriving to take control of the situation, Syracuse and Ondine can finally return to their home. However, Ondine must face the consequences of her past actions. In the end, she is caught by the authorities, and the priest offers Syracuse some final words of comfort, reminding him that happiness requires effort, but it's worth the work. The story ends with Syracuse, Ondine, and Annie all heading back home, but with new understanding. Joanna, as she now chooses to be known, will stay with Syracuse and Annie, but their lives are forever changed by the secrets, lies, and tragedies they've lived through. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more recaps.